to Matters of DeCorum. My name is Scott Corum. This is what matters to me. Now, a little while ago, I talked about what I thought makes a good RPG and what makes a bad RPG, and the fact that even a bad RPG can be educational. You can learn good design philosophies by studying bad RPGs and learning what lessons they have for you. Well, there's another kind of role-playing game out there. Not exactly good, not entirely bad. It's called a Heartbreaker. What a Heartbreaker is, when you talk about a role-playing game, it's a game that had so much promise when it first appeared, when people start to hear about it. A game with so much potential, conceptual incredibleness that you look forward to it, that you get excited, that you start to fall in love with the concept. And then it arrives and you open it up and it might even look beautiful when you first get it. And you start going through it and it just lets you down. It fails you. It doesn't bring everything that it promises to the table. It breaks your heart. So I thought I would talk about one of my more prevalent Heartbreaker games today. One of the games that really got to me. It is no mystery and no secret that I am a huge fan of the works of H.P. Lovecraft. The Cthulhu mythos and all of its extended branches. I was into Cthulhu before most people were aware that the word or the character existed. So, being that into it, original Chaosium game, several editions of the Chaosium version of Call of Cthulhu, the D20 version of Call of Cthulhu, doctored up by Monty Cook, which was absolutely spectacular. Loved these games. The concepts in these games, Delta Green, Steve Jackson Games put out a supplement called Cthulhu Punk for GURPS 3rd edition, and I was very fond of that because it worked out very well, but there was always just a little bit something not quite there. 2007, Wildfire Studios announced Cthulhu Tech. A world where you had the Lovecraft mythos on Earth, active, moving, but at the same time, mankind had developed technology that allowed them to somewhat keep pace. So you had your eldritch monstrosities, but you had your high-tech powered armor, your giant robots to go out and duke it with. And, oh my God, it sounded amazing. And even just talking about the concept now, it's like, wow, getting up in your mecha versus Cthulhu monsters and taking out old ones in powered armor. It's a concept with a lot of promise, particularly with the Lovecraft mythos and the works of HP coming more into the cultural forefront, becoming mainstream, as it were. And it's rarely used correctly in the mainstream, but still, seeing something that you love widely addressed. Awesome. And Cthulhu Tech sounded like an absolutely spectacular entrance into a high-tech, actual going in and duking it out, turning it into an action movie instead of strictly cosmic horror. It appealed to me, and it appealed to a lot of people. It got a lot of backing, and a friend of mine bought one of the first books out there. So there's the setup. I really look forward to Cthulhu Tech coming out. Here's the copy that I own now. My friend Dave ordered this book and received this very book in the very first run of print from Black Sky Studios and Wildfire Studios. There's like even Mongoose. There's a bucket of production companies involved in this. Have you ever gone to see a movie you were really looking for, but then there was like 5 minutes worth of production company logos at the beginning of that movie? Has that ever happened with a movie that you weren't disappointed in by the end of it? Yeah. Yeah. This game has problems. I really like the artwork. I like the artwork on the cover. I like the artwork throughout the book. It has some issues. We'll discuss those in a bit. But when you first get this, the cover is evocative and colorful and engaging. Has elements of things that I want to address in a role playing game. Oh, yes, this looks like something I want to get involved in. And the setting is our familiar Earth, but in a near future where mankind discovered how to wield eldritch magics as a power source and began to tap into his own potential, as it were, of being a society that could integrate magic into its function. And that caused all manner of difficulties, not the least of which is that use of eldritch magic attracted all of the things that have only been on the edges of the unknown for oh so long. And now the earth is beset and besieged by everything. It's a good setting. It's a really good setting. I wish I'd have thought of it. This is really kind of awesome. There are masses of deep ones attacking the coast, and Asia has fallen to he who shall not be named, and we're beset on from space by the Migo and a race of genetically engineered and modified humans that they tried to use against us, but who turned against their Migo masters and have now joined mankind in the fight against the Eldritch Horrors. There's every good element in here. There really is. It's got all of its ducks lined up as far as setting and background and all of the possibilities, all the potentialities. But I would not be talking about this book at this time in this way if I wasn't talking about a heartbreaker. There's a reason I own this copy of the book. This copy, which is the first copy that Dave received. In the history of role-playing game publications, there are some books that were so poorly bound that they are legendary. The original second edition Unearthed Arcana for TSR's Dungeons and Dragons. The first print run of the basic book of GURPS 4th edition by Steve Jackson Games. And the first run of Cthulhu Tech. This is a very poorly printed and bound book. It's not the fault of the designer. It has very little to do with the game design. But the consumer gets one product. And therefore, all the problems with this one product tend to get lumped at the feet of whoever's responsible. But, even with this many companies involved in its production. The pages, most of them stay in, a large number of them don't. And in this particular run, the printing was offset badly in the interior print, so that there are pages, most of them, where text was excised from the bottom because the print was placed too low on the page. You're missing 2 and 3 lines from the bottom of just about every column in this book. More to the point, even the cover, when you produce a full color cover, you generally have a bleed area, that is the area around the edges of your graphics, that will carry you all the way to the corners and edges of the cover. And you will see that on both the front and the back, the bleed area was insufficient to print all the way to the edge. leaving that noticeable but not too detracting white area at the edge. I own this copy because the people responsible for printing engaged in proper customer service and mailed the first editions of the second printing, the corrected prints with improved binding and with the proper page placement as replacements for these books. So my friend got one of those and gave me this one to use as reference. I ran this for a time. I don't want to, I've played it, I've ran it, or I wouldn't have much to comment on. That's cosmetic. That is what the function of the book as a book is. Has some difficulties. I'm not keen on the layout for a couple of reasons. It's a beautiful book. Every other page is numbered, not at a bottom corner of the book, not at the upper corner of the book, but every other page has a page number in the middle of this page. Nothing on this one. So every other page number. It takes a while to get used to it because every other book I have, every other gaming book I have, every gaming book I produce, every gaming book I've seen, most books I've seen, I glance down at the lower right corner when I am trying to reference. That's just kind of how it goes. Lower right corner or lower left if I am trying to zero in on something. If you run across a page that has a special graphic or special print or is trying to establish atmosphere, even that page number is gone. It's an interesting idea to put a page number where no one would ever expect a page number to be, and occasionally just let people guess, but it's not so useful for actually referencing in the book. Then there is the dice mechanic. The role-playing system in Cthulhu Tech is the framework system. That is framework, Framewerk. It relies on rolling multiple d10s. It is not a good system. You'll see two types of reviews for Cthulhu Tech if you start to look up other reviews of it. Type of review number 1. This is a great looking game. I can't believe I've got my hands on it. The artwork is superb. It looks really fascinating. I'm really looking forward to digging in and actually throwing some dice on this. Type of review number 2. What were they thinking when they came up with this system? I cannot believe people actually thought using dice like this was a good idea. I've never played anything so clunky in my entire life. A character has base attributes and skills. The rank of skills that a character has corresponds to the number of 10-sided dice that they throw to try and hit a target number. Problem number 1. There are various levels of difficulty which are associated with not only a target number, but a range of target numbers. If I want to hit an easy roll, I need to hit a target number of 7 to 9 with a standard number of 8. This means that the game master has a standard number to go through, but there is always going to be a little, well, is it a 7, 8, or 9? What exactly do I need to hit? Because players will need to know this. Is a 7 a success and an 8 a failure? Do I succeed on an 8? How about a 9? That's a lot of leeway given how the dice system works. Even though there is a standard number in the middle of every range for every level of difficulty that defaults The game master still has to field a whole bunch of what's my target, what's my target, what's my target. It might be different for two different people trying to do the same thing. So, 1, variable difficulty number. There are plenty of examples in the book of what has specific difficulty numbers. But when a game master is designing their own scenario, or even doing it on the fly, it's a range. That can be an issue. Then we have to talk about how the dice actually work. Dice mechanics matter. Dice mechanics can make a game run very smoothly or very slowly. If you're having to reference a lot of material to see what your dice roll means, it's going to slow you down. There's a lot of calculations after you have rolled your dice, then it's going to slow you down. If it's a lot of calculations to work out how many of your dice you roll, it's going to slow you down. But Cthulhu Tech and the framework system is one of the first systems where I've actually had to spend extra time figuring out what my dice meant. Your statistic is your base number. We will leave the base number alone for a moment and talk about your skill ranks. Your skill ranks are the number of 10-sided dice you are going to throw. You will be adding the result of this dice roll to your base number to try and hit your target. Whatever your target is, because that's a range. But what does your dice roll mean? Well, you have a number of different ways to tally up what you rolled on your 10-sided dice. You can take the highest number. Oh, look, I rolled an 8. Nothing else as high as an 8, so I'll add an 8 to my base and see what that is. So I didn't roll anything higher than a 6, but, I'll add that 6 and see what I've got. Or you can add multiples of the same number that you have rolled on your dice. If you rolled a 6 and 4 2s, well, you can add those 2s together, and now you have an 8, which you can add. It gets a little pokerish here. And it gets harder to work out whether you're going to succeed that roll. So you can take your highest number, or you can take multiples of the same number. Or, if you're rolling 3 or more dice, you can take your biggest straight. 2, 3, 4, 5, well, add those numbers together, and that's what you add to your base. 4, 5, 6, hey, that works. And now, working out the chances of succeeding at a roll are very slim. Maybe I'll make some pairs. Maybe I'll make a straight. Now I'm playing poker without the benefit of knowing how many cards there are in the deck. Or, as friends of mine have put it, now we're playing dragon poker. Now I've got to throw my dice, and I don't have a clear result when those dice land. I need to check for a highest number. I need to see if I've got multiples. And I got to lean back and go, oh, wait. I think I might have a straight here. I'm playing Yahtzee, is what I'm doing. With 10-sided dice, usually in the middle of a pitched combat. And the game bogs horribly. You're going to have gamers who aren't going to bother to work these mechanics at all. You're going to have, there's 2 different ends of the spectrum of how much effort a player is going to put into a game. At the top end of the spectrum, you have, I'm going to learn this system and master it so that I know what dice I'm going to roll and I can work out my best advantage. At the bottom of this spectrum, you have, you know what? I'm never going to learn this. I'm going to throw it. Tell me what I need to roll and tell me what it means after I throw that. Game with both types. If you have that second type, or people who are closer to that end of the spectrum, when you're playing Cthulhu Tech, your game is already over. You just don't know it yet. Because the game master is already having to throw contesting rolls in combat for everything that the players are throwing So the game master is having to constantly do these calculations and organizations of the numbers. It's not simple, it's not fast, it's not slick. It is clever at first blush, but when you actually start to use this system, it's not. It's counterintuitive and it is shoddy. Everything in the game has too many hit points. Our fights just wouldn't end. You've got characters and things out there that are 50, 60, 70 vitality points, and you're doing 5 and 6 at a time. My first character carried paired machine pistols because auto fire with both hands was the only way to do enough damage to drop anything in the first round that you're shooting at it. There are very few one-shot kills. There are almost no one-shot kills. There is a damage scale. You might be doing damage or you might be doing scaled damage. It's a lot like mega damage in the Palladium system. If you're familiar with that, you'll already see this is an issue. Or you could have a weapon that is doing hybrid damage, so you're doing this much damage to a human-sized target and the same damage at a higher scale to your mech-sized targets. And I don't understand how that concept even applies, but I know where it came from. I'm going to back up a little bit. Dungeons and Dragons and a great many other role-playing games use a flatline distribution. You roll 1 dice and you have every chance of getting any number on that dice. There is no chance that one number is going to show up more often than another. You're going to have the same chance of rolling a 1 as a 20 every time you throw those dice. A 1, a 2, a 10, a 17, a 20. It's random. Flatline distribution. You modify your character's ability to hit with bonuses. Well, I've got a plus 10 to hit. So I'm going to be throwing something on this d20 and adding 10. And the closer your bonus gets to the reasonable range of the target you got to hit, usually an armor class, the better chance your character has of going, oh, I think I can hit that. I'll take that chance. The generic universal role-playing system, or GURPS, from Steve Jackson Games, uses 3d6, which gives you a nice bell curve distribution. I have a very small chance of hitting 3 1s on those dice, and the exact same small chance of hitting 3 6s on those dice. But the chances that I'm going to roll a combination that comes in somewhere between 9 and 12 is very high. So I've got a bell curve to that distribution. I can rely on my numbers being probably somewhere in here. This can be a very bad result. This can be a critical success, but I have an idea. My character who can succeed when they roll in this area can say, I'll take that chance. There's a pretty good chance I'll nail that. Okay. You don't know. In the framework system, you just don't know. You can look at just about anything and go, I might roll a straight. What are my odds of doing that? The odds of someone at your table being able to calculate a straight or a high straight on a random number of 10-sided dice is lower than your probability of rolling a high straight on a random number of 10-sided dice. There's very little, I think my character might be able to do that. There's, I'm going to throw some dice and I'm going to pray. It works to make the situation grim, but or hopeless, but you're playing competent characters. And if you have a competent character in a situation the character is meant to be able to handle, you need some level of predictability for, do I take that chance? So the system breaks down on a number of levels. There's a reason for that. First edition Dungeons and Dragons, the original, was a complicated set of rules for playing a war game. Not a role-playing game. Well, it was a role-playing game, but it was born from you move miniatures on the map, and every miniature has its own rules for how it acts. Like chess with more complications on a bigger board. Well, I'm going to move this character. And then that advances to, well, this character is a wizard, and it has these rules for governing how many hits it can take, and how it does hits, and what special attacks it can do. And then you have a system for having a narrative that flows into it. Over a number of iterations of Dungeons and Dragons, it's evolved into a very complex narrative storytelling system. It started off, however, as a very complicated war game. If you look at the artwork for some of the mechanized units available in Cthulhu Tech, you will see that it's based on a war game. It's based on a miniatures battle game. The role-playing game is not the original focus of the artwork for those particular miniatures or for the system. The system might work for a war game where turns take a very long time and people are naturally having to try and find advantages and calculating out moves by move by move in a more strategic fashion. In a narrative role-playing game like Cthulhu Tech purports to be, the same system simply does not work as well. In a narrative role-playing game, you need a faster, more effective, and efficient way to determine success or failure. The critical success system is fairly simple. If you have accumulated so much success that you roll 10 or more than your target number, you have scored a critical success, extra effect. If half of your roll, rounding up, comes up one, so half of your dice come up once, you have botched, critical failure. If you're only rolling one die and it comes up a 1, critical failure. That's a little gruesome. But it means that until you have a great deal of skill, or a number of ranks, until you hit 3 ranks in a skill, your chance of failing is pretty high. Even at 3 ranks, 1 in 10 to the third, or 1 in 10 to the second, actually. Actually, that's your chance until you've got more than 4 ranks. The math still follows me sometimes. So actually accomplishing things in this game can be difficult. It is, however, a game with the presence of magic and psionics. You can have character types in here that have magic and psionics. There's no magic or psionics in this book. Or, pardon me, there's very little magic in this book and absolutely no psionics. That's promised in a future book. And until that book comes out, if you want to play a character like that, the game master can give you some kind of special ability that they come with up off the top of their head. There's no guidelines for what the game master can distribute as those possibilities. So your value-added game has a problem. You haven't added your value. I have never considered continued in the next book to be a valid strategy for putting material in your role-playing game, particularly not when you hand out the character classes that can use the special abilities and then fail to provide those characters their functionality. Well, I can pilot a giant robot. I can turn into a monster. I might be able to do things with my mind. Something. I'm not sure. Let's go with it. So that's an issue. Then there are the fact that while you have a number of character classes, they are not all designed to work with each other. It basically depends on what scale the characters are operating at. You can have characters on their own. Just characters walking around day to day doing cyberpunky stuff in the Cthulhu world, and they're good. But if you've got people who can use powered armor, then those people need to be a different group, because if you're in powered armor, you're working at a different scale on a different level. Or if you have a character who can spontaneously turn into a monster to fight the Eldritch foes, then you need to have the entire party be those kinds of people, because other types of characters do not mix with them well. If you are piloting a giant robot, a good possibility in this book, you all need to be giant robot pilots because you're all working at a different scale and level of functionality than every others. If you're piloting the really big, mostly organic cyborg giant robots, you absolutely just cannot be with any other member of the party, because you eat the people who turn into monsters and you're functioning at an entirely different level. This isn't one role-playing game. In one role-playing game, everyone can play the role that they choose to, and the party works as a party. This is a number of different role-playing games where you have to decide what the whole party is going to do. An individual decision gets cut down at that level. You can try to mix and match, but, I've been in very few adventuring groups, very few groups of players who have been able to all put their heads together and go, yeah, we can all play in that particular theater. I don't need to be able to use a specialty other than anyone else's. Particularly not when half those specialties don't have abilities that are available until the next book comes out. Then there's a little issue with originality. I've mentioned characters who can turn into monsters. There is a secret organization, there's a corporation that has been turning people into monsters so that they can go out and enforce their will on an unsuspecting world, and another organization opposes them, and that opposing organization can give player characters the ability to immediately transform into eldritch monsters with special powers that go out and fight the evil corporates. You can turn into a monster that goes out and fights the monsters created by another corporation. Where have I heard that concept before? Yes, it's Bio Booster Armor Guyver, a anime series and manga series, one of my favorites actually, and it doesn't get a lot of love from the modern anime fans and critics, but I liked Guyver. I liked Guyver a lot. I like Guyver enough to recognize the damn artwork when I see it, or the character designs, and, well, they used some of those in here. But it's not like they just took the name of the bad guys, took off the first letter, and put a D in front of it. No. In Guyver, the Guyver was fighting the corporation's monster known as the Zoonoids. But the evil corporation in here, their monsters are called Doonoids. So that's not even a joke. That's exactly what they did. They just called them Doonoids. Their strategy for hiding the fact that they were using this material from BioBooster Guyver was the same strategy that a 6-year-old uses to try and give his imaginary friend a name other than the person down the street he likes. It doesn't end there. because I talked about these big, giant, organic robots, these tall Engels, as they are known, that have armor, and a pilot gets in a tube which gets inserted into the Engel, and then they go out and they fight monsters of their size. And if it sounds like I'm describing the plot line from Neon Genesis Evangelion, you win the prize. The humanoids, modified by the Migo to be the alien race that was meant to conquer the Earth and ended up teaming up with us, are very poorly disguised drow. And, oh geez. It's one thing to use the Lovecraft mythos. That's so open source right now. That is so in the common usage. I can use Cthulhu in my books if I choose, or write a story based on Lovecraft's writing using names of the elder gods or great old ones, or the terms elder gods or great old ones with impunity. It belongs to the world now. But once you start recognizably borrowing heavily from intellectual properties that you are neither crediting nor referencing, there may be an issue. It does not detract necessarily from gameplay, save for the fact that in order to get the exact, I had to mix and match some of their Guyver-like monsters to actually get the Guyver. They split up its appearance and its abilities so that there was not a direct correlation. But it just took a little jigsaw work to put them back together. What else? Far be it from me to talk about a game using a certain amount of racy material and relying on sexual dimorphism to enhance certain aspects of the game and its marketability. Lord knows I would never have. Okay. Yes, I've done that. Guilty of it. It's one reason that I've moved from one product line to another product line, because I'm trying to divorce myself from that strategy. I was young, I needed the money. When you look at character types, the racial descriptions, the sexual dimorphism is uncomfortable. The males are generally more than fully clothed in fairly standard futuristic gear. Looks pretty good. Females, not so much. Hard for me to show an example without pages falling out. There's the racial descriptor page for the race that was modified by the Migo, the Nizadi. They are dark-skinned. Many have silver hair and or silver eyes, although most anime colors are acceptable, with their white body tattoos. And you'll notice there's a lot more bare skin on the female side than there is on the male side. There are terms used in this book that go so far as to make me slightly uncomfortable. They are not terms and situations that are not mentioned in some of Lovecraft's works, and certainly works that have been derivative of Lovecraft or based on his work over the years. Yes, when deep ones come ashore, they are looking for humans to mate with so that their hybrid children can one day become greater deep ones, go to the ocean and serve Mother Hydra and Father Dagon. To have the esoteric order of Dagon establishing coastal rape camps so that for that specific purpose might be pushing things a little bit. Referring to the forces of Hastur that are taking over Asia as the Rapine Storm. Might be descriptive and it might be what they're doing, but again, it is pushing that boundary of taste. Nowhere in this book are these factors more apparent than in the sample adventures, which rely on the lowest denominator, shock value Cinemax 2 a.m. horror movie sex cliches to increase the tension and then take them into further areas that are more degraded to give the game an edge. Okay, yes, I have approached that area. But when I approached this area, I did it with as much caution as I could to protect the sensibilities of those people who might be offended. Something not done as much in this book. I don't think its disclaimers are adequate. That's me. There are a lot of more books in this line. They did fill in the powers of those additional classes. More magic, more psionics or presence of psionics at all, background for all the characters, more tech, more robots, more weapons, more everything. It's a well-populated game world now that has matured a bit since its first outing. But this book remains a heartbreaker. I can't pick this up and, with only a handful of 10-sided dice and character sheets, run this game out of this book and produce a desirable outcome as far as what everyone wants to spend their weekend doing, sitting around a table throwing dice. It has a limited usage, and its nonsensical system and hit point amounts. A good game master can make any game fun. My friend Dave, who first ran this once he got this book, and his replacement, we had fun with the game. But I ran it. I had fun with the game, and so did the players. But after a very small amount of time of me running it, I was asked if I wouldn't be interested in taking the characters and the material and shifting it over into a different system that actually made sense. Which I did. And it was a more enjoyable experience afterwards. Your system affects how people enjoy your game. Your material affects the comfort of the people at the table. The comfort of the people at the table affects how people enjoy the game. No game master that I've ever played with has used the adventures in this book. Some of them even know there were adventures in here. The ones who have read it choose to ignore them or set this book down. Yeah, they're that bad. That is not to say that this book does not have a lot of potential. The setting has a lot of potential. Some of the character options have a lot of potential. Some of the concepts have a lot of potential. And if you want to do the work, you can drag the potential out of this using a system that you prefer to run in. It'd be great in a superhero game or another mecha game or some system that combines both. And I had an argument with some people a while ago, years ago, over what the least important part of a game was. Is it the setting? Is it the artwork? Is it the writing? And a friend of mine pointed out very adequately and correctly that the system is the least important part. If you've got a good setting, if you've got good artwork, if everything else is fine, you can run it in another system. I've done it myself 100 times. Find a game that everything is great. You love the setting, you love the artwork, you got great reference in it, but the system, run it in another system. It's not that hard. This just combined so many things that should have been magnificent. Cheapened them with obviously copied references and poorly borrowed material. Confused it all with a system that slowed everything down and made people think more about how their dice were operating than how their character was operating, which is never what you want to do. And traded sensationalism and objectionable material for dark and gritty. You want dark and gritty, you pick up a copy of Cyberpunk 2020. That's dark and gritty. You want it to get darker and grittier, you pick up the supplement Listen Up, You Primitive Screwheads, which tells the game master how to keep it as dark and gritty as possible. Those are some good books. Those lack the things that this book thought was necessary for dark and gritty. There's a right way and a wrong way to do things. I'm not saying this book did everything wrong. I'm not saying that this book did the things wrong that I don't agree with. But when this book and the material in it gets in the way of me enjoying the world it purports to put me in, it's worse than a bad game. If I want to be in that world, if I look at this cover and go, I want to get in a suit of powered armor and stop that robot from stopping her from casting that spell, whatever she's doing, I want to do that. And I pick up dice, and 15 minutes later, I'm all Beavis and Butthead. This sucks. I want to go get a Slurpee. It's worse than a bad game. It's a heartbreaker. It has lessons. It tells me what not to do with a lot of material. Next time I'll try and be a little bit more positive about another game system, or perhaps even talk about my own a little bit more. See if I can't provide some clearer examples. In the meantime, if there's someone out there who has a differing opinion on this book, and, that's certainly possible. I have noticed that people can develop a following for anything. If you want to try and change my mind, comment, share this video, see if you can find people who share your opinion or perhaps share mine. Hunt me up on Facebook. Teach me how to use this Roll20 thing. Run a game for me of this with this system that doesn't bog every time I need to do a task check and resolve combat. You can change my mind. Until then, my heart will remain broken by this book. And by a dozen others. When you love role-playing games, heartbreakers come along really often. So for now, thank you for your time. I'm Scott Corum. This is what has mattered to me. I will see you next time on the next Matters of DeCorum.